Welcome back to the Attack on Titan comparison series. Today we'll cover episode 81, which covers the entirety of chapter 124, and while there might be less content for adaptation here, the anime makes up for it with some of the best 2D action we've seen in a long time, so there's more to cover than you might think. So without further ado, let's get right into it. This time the episode starts the adaptation process right away with Annie's dad in the realm of the coordinate. It's pretty impressive that he doesn't react at all when he's called back. Talk about having a hardened personality. Speaking of hardening, as we move back to the Shiganshina district, the anime decides to show us Reiner's broken armor a little earlier now as he and Gabi start searching for Falco. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the process of it breaking away, kinda like we did in season 2. It doesn't need to be animated, but I would have at least liked a still frame of this shot because it also contextualizes how Reiner saved Gabi in the first place. Of course, him saving her took a great toll as his back got really screwed up in the process. Even more so in the anime because he couldn't even finish his explanation to Gabi before falling flat on the ground. In the manga, he managed to hang in there just a little bit longer. Gambare, Reiner, gambare. As Gabi brings Reiner into the now vacant house, we get some character repositioning. See, the manga actually shows how Gabi carried Reiner before he decides he doesn't like that wall and moves to another one. It really seems like Reiner isn't in his right frame of mind right now, as telling Gabi to tell everyone in Marley about the rumbling is kinda pointless. Every Eldian, even the ones in Marley, got Eren's message after all. Although he is right in saying that trying to stop Eren seems kinda hopeless at this point, as the manga illustrates how Reiner managed to get some distance with no armor from the walls as Eren starts transforming. It sucks that we lost this depiction, but we did get to see some more of Eren's transformation last episode. From here, Reiner passes out, leaving Gabi to her own devices. She takes it pretty well though, as after she ties up her hair in the same way Eren did, she tells Reiner to get some rest and that she'll bring everyone back. These two lines don't exist in the anime. It just ends with Gabi saying that she'll save Falco. It was nice of her to leave some food for him though. It actually reminded me that people moved back into this district after they reclaimed it in season 3. Now we move to the roof where John is letting out his reservations about the rumbling. Watching this episode again, I couldn't help but wonder if Connie was looking at John during this speech or Falco, because by now I think we know what his plans are. Connie aside, I really do feel bad for John here, as ever since season 1 he's only done what he's done simply out of obligation, so seeing his even more distraught face from the manga really hurts. He's probably wondering what all this was even for in the first place, as he convinces himself that everything Eren did was justified in some way. But from here the somber tone is cut short as the pure titans start invading the city and we get some more of that 2D ODM Sakuga that we've missed so much. Yeah, I know it's called 3D ODM gear, but it's in 2D, so you know what I mean. Some of the soldiers in the background are still in 3D, but the center stage of these cuts have shifted their focus to more 2D oriented art. Likewise, Mappa really nailed the weightiness of these titans and how they move around like giant toddlers. It creates a great juxtaposition to the speed of the scouts themselves. It's also the first time this episode where they go off the books a little bit, as basically none of the action in this panel is shown in the anime, except for these two guys here that unfortunately didn't quite make it out unscathed. This is the part where John decides it's time for them to start getting involved, as Mikasa asks him what his plan for Falco is. And while John seems to have a plan for what to do, Connie has one that he's been dying to do since season 2. This kind of situation is reminiscent to what Levi had to deal with when choosing between Armin and Irvin, and Connie isn't afraid to play that card against Armin. You can tell even beforehand that he doesn't care what Armin has to say, especially in the manga. But just as Connie's temperament starts to get the better of him, he gets the chance he's been waiting for as this handsome fella comes into play. Ever since season 1, I've missed these guys and how they move in their own interesting ways. I love how the Titan stumbles a bit when he crashes into the first building before literally face planting into the next one. After this Titan comes in, you might have noticed that Connie was a little faster at finessing John in the manga, because since John doesn't fall over in this version, it means that Connie yoinked him while he was jumping away from the Titan. Damn, Connie's really not pulling any punches, is he? As much as Armin and everyone else would like to go after him and stop Connie from starting another war, they've unfortunately got their hands tied at this moment. Mikasa aside, Armin and John have come a long way since the beginning of the series. I'm just remembering how scared they used to be of these things. Kinda like how scared everyone is at the fort right now as we transition over to them. Except for Yelena, she's kinda shell-shocked at the moment as she watches the Titans slowly invade the fort. Also, if you look closely at the fort itself, the structure of it has changed a little bit. Not only that, but it looks like the anime may or may not have forgotten to show the hole that Galliard made while attacking Eren. And not to dunk on the anime even more, but I think we could have gotten at least a little more detailed with the surrounding Titans here. Their thick line art kinda creates a disconnect between them and the highly detailed building that they're attacking. Those little nitpicks aside, I love how this episode continually ups the nostalgia factor with some scenes that really harken back to some of the ones from season 1 during the fight for the Trost district. We had a similar scene play out way back when all the recruits were hiding out near the refueling station. There's a lot of parallels here, especially that shot of John looking at the Titans through the crack in the walls. While these scenes are super similar, it also creates a meaningful distinction, as the one who saved them back then was Eren, but now he's arguably the one that let this all happen in the first place. But we'll put this event on hold for a bit, as we now move over to the Blouse family running for their lives from a similar sized Titan that ate Kaya's mother. And just like in season 2, Kaya still isn't very good at getting away from these things, as all it took was one anime exclusive roar from the Titan to cause her to lose her focus and slam right into a gate. While it might sound horrible, I kinda like how they animated this fall. You can really tell by her limp body movement that the impact caused her to lose her motor functions for a little bit. And maybe that's why she never really sits up like she does in the manga, even after the Titan breaks through the gate and falls down with her. But as interesting as that was, there are some consistency errors here. As Nikuro is running away with the Blouse family, he has a rifle on his back that seems to come in and out of existence in both the manga and the anime. All the way up to when he tries to stop Mr. Blouse, Nikuro shows up a couple of different times, but each time it's a toss-up as to whether he has the rifle or not. But while Nikuro doesn't make the best use of his transparent rifle, Gabby certainly makes great use of hers as she blows a hole right through the Titan's mouth. Just look at all that damage. We even see the bullet hit the staircase behind the Titan to boot. This rifle certainly packs a punch, but it seems like the design of the rifle changed a little bit as there's no longer a scope on it. Not that it would make a difference in close range combat anyways. With that new design, we also now get to see how it's reloaded before Gabby jumps off some anime exclusive boxes to get even more air than usual. Really, the music here is palpable and it gives me goosebumps every time I watch this scene. By the end of this cut, we can really see the pure terror that these rifles can inflict on Titans, as his head is basically holding on by a thread at this point. It is a little weird that it hasn't flown off by the end of the cut, but the speed of the cut itself as well as the quick subsequent ones distract from this fact pretty well. The head never actually flew off in the manga, so it's hard to complain too much. Honestly, I really appreciate just how consistent MAPPA is with their blood and smoke effects. Just like the blood splatter from episode 80 as well as the ones before, the blood still has an extremely thin feel to it, like someone just dropped a glass of tomato juice or something. And the smoke always has this distinguishable flow pattern to it, aided by its low frame count towards the end of the explosion. It also helps that it sticks to a standard of just two different shades, light gray and dark gray. MAPPA might have a lot of trademark effects, but they're also good at playing homage to the work that came before them. I can still feel Wit's soul alive and well here. Just look at some side-by-side footage and you'll see just how much homage MAPPA pays to Wit Studio. They recreate a lot of shots frame by frame and even use some of Wit Studio's work now and then. That being said, it doesn't seem like they had enough homage in them to put Sasha's arrows back into the scene here as Kaya calls Gabi Onechan. But anyways, it's after this that we get our first normally placed public disclosure cut screen, which basically says how dangerous the anti-Titan rifle is, to both the Titan and the user. I really have to wonder if Isayama wrote these, even if they aren't technically in the manga. If anyone knows, let it be heard in the comments. Back in the thick of it with one Titan down, we have one vacant manga panel here of Gabi wondering why Kaya was calling her sister, as well as Mr. Blouse's shock at seeing Gabi, aka Mia. We also miss out on some manga exclusive representations here, such as Nikuro taking a look at Gabi's rifle before giving it back to her, as well as Kaya eyeballing Gabi as she cries. Personally, I would have liked this in the anime because it shows that she's really taking the time to understand her feelings on being saved by someone she tried to kill at one point. In the end though, a mutual understanding took place between all parties as they decide to protect her from the scouts. Even Nikuro gets in on this as he picks up Gabi's rifle one more time to prove her innocence, though he did need a second to think about it in the manga. Needless to say, Gabi is astounded by how much support she has right now, as in the anime they continue shouting at the soldiers until they agree to let it go. As they get escorted to safety, we get some heart-to-heart from the revenge trio as they talk about the devils that live within them. This could have easily been turned into the cliche break the cycle of hatred trope, but I'm really glad how Isayama wrote this. No one's perfect. Sometimes we act for the wrong reasons. People are sometimes influenced negatively by those around them, and that can lead to a world where everyone's just fighting to survive. When you wander in the forest for too long, you can get caught up in a web of death, creating even more pain and suffering until our devils get the better of us. Nicolo learned that lesson from Arthur, and from here on out, it looks like Kaya and Gabi will carry on that message the best they can too. Really goes to show how much you can learn from your elders. From there, we transition to some people who are about to die in that forest as the Titans reach into the fort to snack on some of the recruits. Mainly on this guy right here, whom the anime now calls Tsuruma. This leads us into the best part of the episode, as the nostalgia trip it's been fueling up to now goes full swing with my personal favorite song, Barricades by Hiroyuki Sawano. And it all starts off with our favorite instructor Shadis giving us the Wit Studio style nape slash. These are the angles I miss the most from Attack on Titan. Characters setting up their attacks before their ODM gear whips them into the camera by the belt, and the awesome close-ups of the blades slicing through the napes of the Titans. For those that started watching this show back in 2013, you can't look at me with a straight face and say you didn't feel anything during this part. And Shadis is the one that started that feeling train as he tells the recruits to get off their asses and get ready to fight. And Mikasa is quick to follow up that energy too, as she saves Yelena and Oniokopon from a Titan that crawled all the way to the top. But for the anime, it's really just Yelena. The framing of this shot is pure desktop wallpaper material as the Titan slowly gets closer to Yelena, and I love the half-second quick cut that we get of Mikasa's face before watching some of her handiwork in action. But Yelena doesn't really seem to care much for these heroics as the Titan's face comes crashing into her building. And during the same panel when this happens, John starts sending out a plan to all survivors for how to kill the rest of the pure Titans as we move into the cut of Armin and him zooming past all the Titans on the ground. By this part, the music is starting to hit its first climax, and knowing how good John is at getting out of tight situations, the feeling of a counterattack at play is in full force, ramping up the epic feel of the scene even more. Everyone else seems to feel that energy too, as they do exactly what John says and start getting the spears ready for a dolphin dive attack on the roof. The anime gave us some time to get ready too, as we get some more cuts of everyone getting ready with their thunder spears, as well as forming a circle around the roof. Like I said, this building has changed its design a little bit, making it easier for them to get ready and jump off on the same floor. Drawing this sequence out ever so slightly was a wise choice, as it lets the music play out a little more to slowly ramp up the tension. Everything after this is history, as Mappa creates one of the best action sequences this series has seen in a long time. Getting the circling shot of all of our hardened soldiers doing dolphin dives into Titan-infested waters as John yells fire is epic enough in its own right, but they just had to send us over the edge by adding the vocals into the soundtrack at this point. This circling shot actually starts what will mostly disconnect us from the manga for a while, as most of the cuts stick to their own choreographic rhythm in accordance with the music. As for that circling shot, this was very hard to figure out, because while the background is clearly pre-rendered, the characters, well, that's not so easy to figure out. There's definitely some hand-drawn stuff here, don't get me wrong, but I can't help but get the feeling that there's some 3D wizardry going on here. I say this because they seem just oddly rigid by the way they're posed. The positioning of their legs never move regardless of the angle, and the curls on the wires that are attached to their gear never move, even though the air should do that for them. Not to mention the bend on their ankles look like something straight out of a video game. But at the same time, some of the details on their equipment, as well as some of their faces, look hand-drawn. Personally, I think that 3D models were used for this cut, but then they were drawn over in an almost rotoscoping fashion. Maybe not for all of them though. By positioning all the scouts in the scene using a renderer, all the animator would really have to do is simply trace over everything without having to keep track of where everyone is depending on the angle of the camera. This would save both time and money, and while it doesn't look the cleanest, it is the most efficient. But then again, I could be completely wrong about this, so let me know in the comments what you think of this cut. After this though, things started getting a little easier to dissect, starting with John's cut sending the first thunder spear into a Titan's nape. While it's kinda hard to follow in motion, the background comp essentially does a half rotation from being upside down to right side up by the time John sends his spear out, and after this awesome frame showing how the spear disconnects from the arm, the background comp changes yet again as we watch the blue propulsion get closer to the Titan. You might recall that this propulsion used to be yellow, but ever since the Blu-ray release in the first half of the season, the color has since changed. Colors aside, all this stuff here is pure 2D glory as the scouts follow up John's attacks. This stuff is all pretty much done on 2s, and that's mostly the same for the explosions that would soon follow, besides some of the initial frames of the impacts themselves. These explosions are interesting because while they all might have the same bright orange and yellow color, their frame times can differ wildly. See how they update at different rates? This essentially lets Mappa use explosions on 2s, but gives us the feeling of the whole scene changing every frame, not just every other frame. After the explosions, we start adapting the two panels of the recruits luring the Titans to the fort. Since Mappa extended this part a little bit, we get to see some pretty interesting Titan designs, as well as one of the best cuts this episode has to offer. This is the kind of 3D camera work that we've sorely lacked from this season. Watching maneuver gear action in the city will never not be awesome to watch as the camera follows them in between the buildings. While there are a lot of soldiers in this scene, most of the focus is placed on Tsuruma here, as all the other soldiers come in and out of the scene as the camera shifts around while moving forward. This man has some crazy skill for a recruit, as he's shooting his lines out and readjusting his body between shots really well. Just like the rest of the soldiers, there's a certain erratic nature to his movement that speeds up the scene. You can really tell he wants to get the hell out of there. And as if both the character movements and the camera movements weren't enough, the hooks and steam flying out randomly from each soldier adds to that speed. 2D effects like this are usually enough to give us a good feeling of speed alone, but piling them on to excellent choreographic and compositional work makes it one of MAPPA's best cuts thus far. These eccentric movements lead us into an anime-only depiction of them leading the Titans right into the outer walls of the fort for the scouts to take care of them. One Titan that we didn't see come in though was Pixie's Titan that Armin and John will notice as they get ready for their next strike. I like how the anime did this because now we get some additional hurt reactions from the likes of Mikasa while the scenes from season 1 start playing. Again, good on MAPPA for showing some of Wit's cuts here. There might be a slight art disconnect here, but it really gives these moments more sentimental value. This man got us through some hard times, but now they know what needs to be done since that guy is starting to shimmy up the building. Except the building is a little too wide in the anime for him to do that. After they all jump off the building, Armin's the one that will have to do the deed here. This thunder spear of Armin's was timed so perfectly as it kicked up the music one more time as Pixies starts to pass on. Rest in peace, Pixies. You were one of the real ones. From here we watch the remaining Titans getting taken out with even more high-tier animation. Animation that would technically adapt just a couple of panels from the manga, so there's a lot of added stuff here, like Louise flying through the flames in this cut. Just like their blood and smoke, MAPPA's fire is just as on point as it was earlier, but it looks even cooler when you watch someone soar through them as we get all the benefits of the vibrant composition shrouding the character as well as the spot blurs that recreate the fire's hazy effect. After Demon Slayer and this, I'm convinced that just like Rain, everything looks great in fire. But fire isn't the only thing Louise has to worry about, as a Titan's about to eat her yet again. This quick little anime exclusive bit of Mikasa saving this girl just like she did in the past is aided by some simple impact frames showing the true might of Mikasa's Herculean strength as she slams the Titan into the ground with blood spray like you've never seen before. And it's this spray that transitions us into the second banger cut of this episode with Mikasa doing Mikasa things. These are the type of cuts that we need more of. Singular cuts with multiple Titan kills. It's these type of cuts that we get to see some real slingshot action as Mikasa whips around the frame. Using 3D maneuver gear is like an art form that requires expressive acrobatic movement, and it's shots like this that remind me that only the anime medium could truly do this form of movement justice. You know, cuts that aren't afraid to get into your face at times, to show you the piece of a Titan's nape or a hook shot flying past the frame. On top of which, there's so much depth that are in these scenes. Sending Mikasa out into the distance like this before bringing her back to us not only portrays an excellent sense of depth, but emotionally brings us closer to the action. And it's after these acrobatics that we see Louise admiring Mikasa's crazy skills, while getting a better depiction of how she got hurt as a fireball engulfs her. This really wasn't properly portrayed in the manga, so it's nice that we have this now. Every action cut after this are mainly explosions and falling Titans as the scouts finish up their work. Though I think the coolest shot is this Titan who's engulfed by the fire of a thunder spear. He looks so damn demonic, and even more so as he falls down right into the camera and his burnt face is the last thing we see. It's at this exact point that the music comes completely to a halt, and we successfully finish one of the best 2D Attack on Titan fight scenes that MAPPA has ever animated. Granted, there aren't many of them, but I'm just glad that MAPPA put their best foot forward for it. Now we can get back into strict manga territory again as the survivors watch the rumbling Titans slowly make their march into the outside world. Now with some downtime, John and Oniokapon have a nice little chat regarding how safe they are, but not so much the rest of the world, at least until Flock shows up a little late to the party. This is another one of those situations where the character expressions were changed a little bit to fit the mood of the scene a little more. But some of those expressions are unchanging, especially for Yelena, who seems to have completely given up on life at this point. This will casually bring us into the scene where Armin and Mikasa are following Artur down the stairs where they'll meet up with Gabby yet again. I think repositioning these characters here was pretty wise, as the Blouse woman here seems to have weirdly grown a few feet since the last time we saw her. Anyways, this is where Gabby asks Armin where Falco is, and he starts to explain everything off screen. From here, there are some vacant lines that we need to talk about. Firstly, Gabby no longer asks Armin why Connie's mother was a Titan to begin with. See, normally she would have gotten a direct answer from Kaya right next to her saying it all happened 4 years ago, and this confirmation would lead Armin into the second cut line of him basically agreeing with her. But the anime does something different. It instead starts with Armin's dialogue right here when he says that Connie's been visiting his mother for 4 years since she couldn't move. And basically before Armin can finish this line, this is when Kaya says her 4 years ago line in a much more reactionary manner, and Gabby starts to realize why this all happened in the first place. Gabby's really done a 180 since realizing that the people living here were, well, people. It goes to show that even the most hard-headed of people can change for the better even if you were raised a certain way. She wants this all to end with the least amount of bloodshed, just like Armin, who is now focused on one particular thing she said about Reiner's armor. This brings us into the first unhardened shot we've seen of Annie since season 1, who seems to be having a hard time breathing after, not breathing for 4 years. This is the panel that ends chapter 124, and likewise it also ends out the episode. This episode was a true nostalgia trip. It brought back a lot of elements from previous seasons and brought newfound life to them. I was afraid the season would end without seeing more raw Titan killing action, but with the Sakuga we saw this episode, those worries were laid to rest. It's clear that MAPPA has upped the ante since the beginning of the final season, and seeing how the season finale has since been delayed, I have high hopes that we're going to see some greatness in the coming weeks. That aside, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you really did, consider giving it a like and sharing it with a friend. And hey, also subscribe for more Attack on Titan comparison content. Well, that's it for me. As always, I hope you all have a fantastic day. This is Registry, signing off.